I just find it hard to believe that that such an elite defensive midfielder can drop off that quickly.
But there is hope where there is Son. Hello and welcome back to Monday Vibes, everybody, where we are here to discuss the biggest results and talking points from across the Premier League weekend. I'm joined by a very sunny Mikey McCubbin.
Yes.
You have actually caught the sun a bit this weekend.
A little bit. I was out in the sun on Saturday, a little bit on Sunday as well. So yeah, got the shorts on.
Lovely stuff.
Shorts are staying on until September. Hopefully, we'll see. Unless there's another huge drop in temperature. But Good weekend despite the result yesterday. What about yourself, Diggs?
Yeah, it was good, thank you. I was on a stag do in sunny Norfolk, which was very nice. We were out on the boats on Saturday. Pop World, the club, on Friday night, which I do not recommend to anyone, but it did have a very good kebab next door.
Really?
Actually,
Okay, well there you go.
Highlight
that's the main thing.
But no, all good. And then an easy journey back to London yesterday, back just in time to watch a weird deluge at Old Trafford in the final sort of 20 minutes. The roof leaking, goals, entertainment, maybe a little bit in shorter supply, I would say.
Very much
Mikey,
so.
what did you make of it?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think any United fan was expecting too much going into this game, to be honest, aside from the fact that Arsenal have a pretty poor record at Old Trafford, generally speaking, over the last 20 years. I mean, given what we saw at Palace on Monday night, I also wasn't expecting anything too anything as horrific as that. I think that Palace game was rock bottom. I don't think this United team can get much worse than that. And I think, to Ten Hag's credit, he has generally bounced back from really, really poor displays with something a bit more organised in the next match. And this was more organised. I know the Trossard goal, was another symptom of where how shambolic United have been defensively this season, and that was a really, really poor moment. But otherwise, United were in the game for the full 90 minutes. Garnacho and Ahmad caused the Arsenal defence. I wouldn't say major problems, but they certainly asked questions of the Arsenal defence. And Gabriel and Saliba, were the two best players on the pitch on the day. And it's funny hearing it from an Arsenal perspective because whenever the camera did pan to the crowd, the away section was nervous, and I think a
lot of head and hands.
There was, I think, among the Arsenal side, it felt it was a bit of a nervy display. I think given Arsenal's record at Old Trafford, given the fact that the pressure was on after City beating Fulham so comfortably on Saturday, it was always going to be a tough test no matter what form United are in, no matter how many players United had out. And I think, if that Trossard goal doesn't come when it comes, then I think it could have been a really, really uncomfortable second half for Arsenal. But luckily for them, Casemiro has no idea about a defensive line, apparently. The whole United back line in many moments in this game, but in particular there were just, there just doesn't seem to be any communication there. First of all, Johnny Evans kind of seemingly never wanting to give Onana a passing option when he's trying to pass out from the back.
They're just running into midfield.
And kind of pointing to Dalot, who isn't in the best position himself. And then Casemiro just not... just playing on Havertz in that way. It was so strange to see. And I think, Casemiro's been getting a lot of flack recently, and, various pundits and journalists saying that maybe his time at the top level is done. I just find it hard to believe that, that such an elite defensive midfielder can drop off that quickly. Yeah. Like in 12 months, drop off that quickly. I also don't want to. I tend not to think that players can't be arsed. Like, I do tend to kind of think fairly highly of professionals. Like they're doing their job on a big stage. But I don't know what it is with Casemiro. Like it does feel a little bit like he's lost something. and it's not just a physical thing. Like
it
lost a bit of spirit. Like surely, like I don't know how you can switch off in a moment like that, or just like seemingly lose your sense of kind of defensive know-how, like lose your sense of kind of positioning, which it's so odd. Like it's it's the sort of thing that you would be annoyed at if you saw like a defender in the 9th tier making that kind of mistake. So that was I think the essentially where the game was won, wasn't it? Arsenal I think they didn't manage another shot on target until the 65th minute. They did test Onana. I think Declan Rice, and who was it with the header late on? Was it Martinelli? Late on, forced some really good saves out of Onana, but otherwise Arsenal, did not attack with the kind of fervour that we're used to seeing. I think they only managed 11 shots in the game. United managed 14, although they did put more on target and created a lot more XG. It wasn't, it was far from a vintage Arsenal display, and it does make me think a little bit. I guess we can we'll get onto City, but Arsenal have given themselves as good an opportunity as they could have of winning this title. I think that there's, you can look back to the Fulham game, which they lost. You can look back to the West Ham game. You can look back to the Villa game, which, is fairly recent. But generally speaking, Arsenal's level has been, across the season, probably the best in the league. I think they've probably been consistently the best team when you look at the season as a whole. So they can't really do much more. But if the Premier League season was like 11 months long, then I think, and we had to play until the end of June, I think City would end up running away with it. Like it's so clear. Like Arsenal had that period between February, March, early April where they were absolutely bulldozing teams.
I think slightly, they had a good run of fixtures.
Easier teams as well, but they were getting, they
were brilliant.
But but equally they were playing bad teams. But United in this form are at least as bad as many of those teams.
True.
It does feel like Arsenal are slightly running out of steam, and that's fine because it's been a long season. And they had the Champions League to contend with as well. But it does feel like this Arsenal team, I think this Arsenal team have, a game left in them basically. And then, well, I guess then it's the Euros, but it does look like they need a bit of a break. So but shout out to Trossard, now more non-penalty goals than anyone else in this Arsenal side, despite playing only 1,500 league minutes. That's, half the minutes of Bukayo Saka. That's 1,000 fewer minutes than Kai Havertz. 5 goals in his last 7. He has stepped up so well in the last couple of months. But Doogie, what did you make of this game? And what do you think it says about where these two teams are right now?
It was a really weird game, I thought, in patches, to be honest, because United, I thought, looked better than they had in a long time, but still the sort of lack of quality in every facet of the game is still there for United. Like the amount of balls that Onana hits long and they just inevitably lose the aerial duel and then the ball comes straight back at them. The amount of times they try and get some sort of combination play in midfield and lose the ball and the ball comes back at them. It's really difficult to find really any rhythm in Man United at the moment. Having said that, some of the balls they play, particularly from Casemiro in the first half to Højlund, he's got a great opportunity there when he kind of slips over and his foot kind of gives away underneath him. He's obviously found it slightly difficult to find his top level again since that injury. And then you're kind of looking at Amad Diallo as being probably United's brightest attacking player, which is quite a statement given he started so few minutes and has had a big impact in games against Liverpool in the FA Cup and now against Arsenal as well. Ultimately, didn't obviously create a goal or finish one himself, but there's definitely a player in there that can operate in a very high Premier League level, and we saw it last year at Sunderland. There is a lot of quality there. You almost think, could he have had more minutes this season?
Yeah.
With Rashford's form being so poor, with Antony being just a continuous disaster, really, I think Amad Diallo's slightly been robbed of some minutes there. For Arsenal, I think it's really difficult to make a particularly compelling narrative about any of their midfielders or attackers except for Trossard. But watching Saliba, particularly Saliba yesterday, was unreal. It was just a different level. I think that tackle on Garnacho felt very Van Dijk, peak Van Dijk-esque, like really, really impressive moment. Everyone watching that moment, Garnacho was having a decent game as well. full of confidence, attacking at your best defender, really, coming at you hard. And he stands up in that moment, tackles with his weaker foot, brings away the ball. I thought it was a really, really nice moment.
That potentially wins the game for Arsenal there as well, because if he doesn't get that right, then it could be a pen or maybe Garnacho's through one-on-one.
Absolutely. And then you're looking at Everton next weekend. I can't really see Everton getting anything from Arsenal, to be honest. I think they've done phenomenally well in the last few weeks to get themselves way clear of the bottom three. Of course, they've been safe for a number of weeks as well. They had a magnificent April. But it's just this Spurs game tomorrow. And I suppose actually before we get on to this Spurs game tomorrow, let's touch briefly on Man City demolishing Fulham. We talk about Arsenal and City's level throughout the season. I think they've both been brilliant. I feel like City have really, really turned it on in the last 6 or 7 games. I think they've won 7 in a row. They've scored 4 or more goals in 6 of those games.
I think they're averaging 4 goals a game since the Arsenal draw.
It's super impressive. and we're speaking about them all season being like they're not quite at their ultimate best. But actually, in the last month or two, well, particularly the last 7 games, you can't really complain if they come away with the title either. I think they have, both sides deserve it in a really strange way. I think you can, no one's going to be I don't think there'll be any talk of bottling it unless something weird happens on the final day. I just can't see any bottling happening. And some big players have stepped up for City who, didn't necessarily shine too much in the opening few months of the season. I think Gvardiol has really stepped up in an attacking sense. I think it's now 5 goals in his last 7 games. He didn't score in his first 32. Obviously, a phenomenal goal in the Champions League.
I think he went 12 months without a goal, like in general club play,
which is crazy. I mean, he's not a goal scorer. He's obviously a centre back playing at left back, but the way he takes that first goal in particular, is beautiful.
Amazing. We'll get on to Van der Ven's finish later as well. But it's a funny one with Gvardiol because his at RB Leipzig, I think people have heaped a lot of praise on Guardiola for the way that he's been using Gvardiol recently, and that's fair enough. But I think Gvardiol was signed because City knew he was capable of that in the first place. It's not like he suddenly turned into this kind of player. His shot numbers at RB Leipzig were always exceptionally high for a defender. His general attacking play, whether that be his actual kind of ball carrying in the final third and general link-up play was always exceptionally high for a defender, and that's part of the reason why he or a big part of the reason why he's so highly rated. So I think sometimes Pep can get rightly does get a lot of praise for stuff, but I don't think this was kind of some genius move from him. This is kind of where Gvardiol thrives really. I know he's an excellent one-on-one defender as well, but it's really cool to actually see his talents utilised in this way finally, because it felt like the first 6-7 months of the season he was kind of being boxed into that kind of very defensive left back role, wasn't he? City's back line has obviously been pretty solid over the last 2 years, although actually not as much this season, but it felt like he was being slightly wasted in the system.
I think it also helps that you see him being interviewed post-match as well. His English is impeccable, really. So I think that would have helped him as well. But it was really Nathan Ake, who I thought was probably their best defender up until the most recent couple of months. But he's really stepped up. I think Bernardo Silva had a really good game as well. He's now, I think, on 6 goals and 7 assists in the league. That's another solid return from him. A player that is continually linked with a move away from City pretty much every summer for the last 3 or 4 years, but never really lets his level drop. I think he's such a useful player to have in that squad. De Bruyne created 7 chances as well. I mean, Fulham were flying kites in midweek, and Marco Silva's record against Pep Guardiola is really, really grim. And it felt like they weren't, it's almost an unfortunate video to be put out, but I think the club put it out themselves. So you're kind of writing your own headlines there a bit, Fulham. And they were powerless to stop a City side who have been excellent. I mean, Mikey, there's not really too much to add on Fulham themselves, but let's talk about City versus Spurs tomorrow night. The game that Arsenal are praying that Spurs can do something for them, but it feels like a really tough ask, although Spurs did get a win at the weekend.
They did, I mean, Spurs, obviously came from behind to beat Burnley, relegate Burnley in the process. And yeah, 2 brilliant goals from, two of their defenders. Pedro Porro, like, great strike, was a really
nice.
Great threat all game. And yeah, Van der Ven's finish was beautiful. I think
kind of Haaland-esque.
It was. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, very true. And he's got a similar kind of build to Haaland as well. You kind of have to do that sometimes when your body shape isn't necessarily the most nimble. But yeah, so they'd lost their 4 previous. So yeah, I think Spurs. I think for Spurs to have any chance of taking anything off City on Tuesday, they needed to get a result this weekend. Otherwise, it's just like City in full flow against a really depleted Spurs team. And I mean, they do still have a fairly significant injury list. Udogi's not going to be available tomorrow. Neither is Richarlison. Timo Werner's out. Ben Davies. You've got the more long-term injuries like Manor Solomon, etc. But yeah, like the thing is, yeah, I feel like going to this game, my heart says that Spurs will do something and will get some real jeopardy on the final day of the season. My head says City will probably get it done, but I don't know, like City's record at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium is
not pretty.
It's so bad. And yes, they beat them in the FA Cup there this year, and that will be a big kind of psychological boost to them, but they're still yet to register a goal at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium in the league. They've played there 4 times, they've lost 4 times, and they've never scored there, which is pretty astounding. I can't imagine Pep has that kind of record anywhere else in his career. So there is that. And I guess, as amazing going forward City have been, across the season, like defensively they can be a bit susceptible, and Tottenham's attack has been up there this season. I think there's going to be a lot of pressure, I guess, on someone like Heung-Min Son. Will James Maddison be able to conjure up his best form in a game like this? He's been a bit off it since coming back from his injury. Will like Basuma and Sarr be able to take control in midfield? Like, that's going to be a tough ask for them as well. How much is the influence of Pedro Porro going to be dictated by whatever Gvardiol is doing to him on that right hand side? Like, I think those are going to be the main areas of concern for Spurs. Like, if you can kind of hold your own in like two of those 3 battles, then I think Spurs will have a chance. And I don't know, like, logically, when you're looking at this game, Ange versus Pep, like, you think it's probably going to be quite wild. Like, Ange, obviously, like, famously stubborn, and doesn't, it will probably be quite open. Spurs playing a high line. But having said that, I just think the midweek game in hand in a title race, 1 game before the end, I've just got like City versus Leicester in 2019 in my head, and it feels like something where, for the first time, City, there is pressure on City, and they're great at dealing with it, but there will always be a game where the pressure like almost gets too much, and I could see a game like that where it actually takes just a moment. It needs a moment of genius from someone to win it for City, and that moment of genius doesn't always happen in one 90-minute game. So yeah, that's what I feel like could happen tomorrow night.
I think you're more confident than I am on any sort of Spurs upset. I feel like one of those, when you went through the key
I'm a romantic
battles,
though. I just like to dream.
I'd love to see it. I'd love to see it as well for the sake of what's going to go down next weekend. I think it could be an absolute classic. But in this game, as in next weekend could be a classic, not maybe tomorrow night. I think there's almost too much to ride on it for it to be a classic. It was when you said about their midfield, it feels like one of Basuma or Sarr is going to have to have an absolute outstanding game.
Yeah.
And given recent form, I can only really see it being Sarr. I think Basuma, you mentioned Maddison's drop-off, but I think Basuma's had a really difficult second half of the season, really. But there is hope where there is Son. I mean, he hasn't been at his best this year, but I think he's only scored more goals in his entire career against 4 clubs than Man City. So his record against them, and that's like Leicester, Southampton and Dortmund, I think. from his days in the Bundesliga with Bayer Leverkusen and Hamburg. So he does have a good record against City. He's not been at his best this year. I mean, I feel like a lot of the goals have had to come from other sources. That injury list is extensive. You know, the fact that City have, just to pick out one player, Rodri, who hasn't lost a game in the Premier League since February 2023, at Spurs last year. He's only lost one game in 90 minutes all season. Can Basuma, Sarr, Bentancur, whoever's going to play around him, cause any sort of disruption to his rhythm? I mean, what a sensational player. I think this will be quite one-sided, to be honest. Yeah. I can't really see anything other than a City win. I think 3-1 or so.
Really?
I wish I had more belief in Spurs.
Yeah. And also, like, it will be interesting to see what the atmosphere is like in there, because obviously Spurs want to win, but they're, you know,
Spurs fans say the entire opposite online. That they do not care.
They don't care
at all.
So yeah, it feels like the atmosphere won't be particularly rapturous in that sense.
Although I never know whether what you see online represents match-going fans.
I mean,
that is always the big.
And they do
debate.
still have, you know, with Villa still with 2 games to play as well. They do. There's a small chance they can still get Champions League football. Like, I don't know. Yeah, it's tough. Like, it's tough to really be able to.
Like conclusively say
what kind of atmosphere there's going to be. You know, you saw at Old Trafford, like the atmosphere was pretty good from United fans, even though, you know, it was probably in
they were loving it.
United's best interest for Arsenal to win the league over City.
Despite being absolutely poured on,
not quite as you know, big a rivalry as Arsenal Spurs is in terms of the hatred between the fans, but I digress on that. So yeah, score prediction is 3-1 from you.
I'm going 3-1.
3-1.
I'm afraid.
Oh.
Sorry, Arsenal fans.
I'm gonna go out there and say 1-1.
Yes,
you know,
Mikey. Adding the drama.
But I'm gonna say 1-1. But if it's going to be a City win, it will take a screamer from, I don't know, like Rodri maybe. Probably Rodri. Rodri probably gets the winner in this, doesn't he?
What does he do in
big games? He probably does. Yeah, 25-yard screamer. So yeah, there we have it. Going into the final day of the season, let us know what you think is going to go down at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium tomorrow night. Is there anything else you want to touch on, Dukes, before
Well, we've briefly mentioned it already, but maybe we just kind of mention about the relegation battle now being sort of all but sealed. It's not mathematically just yet. I think there's a goal difference of 12 between Luton and Nottingham Forest. Nottingham Forest are playing Burnley at Turf Moor. Are they going to lose by 6 goals to an already relegated Burnley, or at least 6 goals, and hope that something similar happens in the other game? I just don't really see it happening. Fair play to Nottingham Forest. They've got over the line by hook or by crook just about this season. It's not been a pretty one. I think there's been huge errors made on and off the pitch. I think very few neutrals were really rooting for them after particularly the whole Mark Clattenburg debacle was not a pretty look for the club. But they do have some great players. Like, I think Morgan Gibbs-White has been absolutely brilliant this year. Chris Wood's really stepped up on occasion as well, and they have had enough to get over the line. As for Luton, Mikey, they looked like they were in with a shot, sort of Christmas to sort of February time, but their recent results have not been good.
Yeah, no, and they've had injury problems at points in the season as well. And I mean, ultimately, I think with Luton, it was always a long shot. I think that squad, bar the Ross Barkley and Andro, and even then, a lot of their kind of more experienced players in that squad with Premier League experience are kind of coming towards the end of their careers as well. It's not a Premier League squad that Rob Edwards was working with, and I think tactically, what Luton did this season was up there with the most impressive things we've seen this term. Especially the output from their attackers. Adebayo was excellent. Has been excellent when he's been fit.
Morris has stepped up on occasion.
Yeah, Morris too. And Ogbene as well has impressed at points as well. And Ross Barkley, of course, has been one of the stories of the season with his performances in the midfield. But yeah, it always felt like a long shot for them, especially when you are coming up against, when your nearest rival is Nottingham Forest, who have spent, without turning off the tap for the last 2 years. And, as much of a mess that club has been at points, like they do just have a lot of quality to call upon.
And very like just super deep squad. Like
super
they could play
deep
like
squad.
2 11s of quite similar quality.
Yeah, and yeah, obviously there was the managerial change wasn't particularly popular midway through the season, but Nuno Espirito Santo's got a lot of Premier League experience and can play a really good counter-attacking game. And actually, their attacking numbers this year have actually been quite good. They've certainly not been relegation level. So, yeah, it kind of feels it feels about right.
The three sides that probably deserve to go down.
But I will say this: I think with Leicester coming up, with Ipswich coming up, I don't know who's favourite actually to come up out of it, but
after those thrillers at the weekend.
Yeah, awful games in the Championship playoffs. But say if Leeds or Southampton were to come up, because I think that they clearly are the third and fourth best teams of the Championship, it's just a much tougher competition next year in terms of relegation. And I think Forest. I can very easily see them going down next year, because I just think anyone who's not gone down this year, who's around kind of 16th, 17th, even looking at Brentford, with one game to go, they're still not on 40 points. I think the quality coming up is going to be a lot stronger this time round. I think this is the weakest set of 3 promoted teams. Certainly since I've started watching the Premier League, which is over 20 years ago. So
it was on one of the match of the days this weekend. Anyway, they did the combined points, and it was the lowest in Premier League history.
I mean,
it was like 65 or something.
Yeah,
it's crazy.
I actually think I know they've got more points than them, but I think there's an argument to be made that Sheffield United this season are the worst team in Premier League history. I don't remember Derby being as bad as Sheffield United have been.
Had a couple of
if I'm
bad
honest,
teams as well, but. I mean, I was so young. We were both quite young with Derby. It just felt pretty miserable.
It was pretty miserable, but I just think Sheffield United are worse. I remember Derby County giving Man United quite a good game. The United of Ronaldo, Rooney and Tevez. I remember them giving them a pretty good game at one point.
So conceding 100 goals, I think you should be barred from the Premier League for a few years.
Forever,
Maybe 3 years, just to be you've really got to get over that.
3-year ban, I do feel for Sheffield United fans, but at least you'll win a few games next year.
Yeah, absolutely. And it'll be interesting what happens in the summer with Leicester. They've obviously got some PSR issues. How many of their top players will they still keep hold of? I think they've definitely got enough quality to stay up and will put a better fight in than these guys. But Ipswich you slightly worry for, but I think everyone's just so excited about the story. I think it's just phenomenal work.
And Portman Road will be a fortress.
Yeah, and then you look
be a hard place to go
look at Luton coming up this year via the playoffs, and they were the closest to staying up. We'll still have that outside chance in the final day, but it's not happening. Whatever happens from the playoffs, do not rule out whoever comes up via them as well. But guys, that is the penultimate Monday Vibes for the season. We will be back on Monday. We'll also have Sunday Vibes, of course, but we'll be back on Monday to break down what went down. Hopefully there's a bit of drama to talk about, because it could actually be quite flat in every facet of the table. But we'll be here no matter what. The show goes on. Thanks very much to Mikey. If you guys enjoyed the show, let us know your thoughts about all those results in the comments section, and we'll catch you on Sunday Vibes. Anything to add, Mikey?
No, that's it. I'm playing a gig on Saturday. If anyone wants to come along, might put a link to that in the description.
Absolutely should.
If anyone is in the London area and fancies coming along, Doogie, you'll probably be.
I'm going to be there. I'm going to be moshing at the front.
Yeah. So that might be quite fun.
It's going to be huge.
So yeah, nice one.
See you guys. Bye.